Hello everyone, my name is Fletcher Fick, and I'm here to introduce the Border States Electric Capstone team. This team is comprised of Keenan Kaufman, Colin Yaga, and myself. We are all seniors studying computer science. We are working with Border States Electric for this project. Border States Electric is an electrical supply company that provides products, material management solutions, delivery, and logistics expertise to tens of thousands of customers. I would also like to introduce our fantastic sponsor, Priyanka. She is a web developer at Border States and has been our main point of contact throughout the entirety of the project. She has been very helpful with answering our questions and making sure we have all the required resources to put out the best project possible. The problem Border States has ran into is with their e-commerce site. They have created a site that works great on desktop, but not so smoothly on mobile. Problem is, over 60% of their users use the site on a mobile device. So, they would like a site that not only works great over desktop, but also works great and runs smoothly on mobile devices. The solution is where we come in. We have created an e-commerce progressive web app, better known as a PWA, that uses SAP Hybris as a backend and a JavaScript library called Spartacus as a frontend. This allows a user to be able to use the site on a desktop, but also be able to have an enjoyable user experience on the mobile device thanks to the PWA capabilities. Before we jump in, I'd like to do a quick summary of the presentation. First, we'll talk about the schedule. This includes different sprints that we've worked on. Next will be the demonstration of the site. Then we'll talk about the risks and issues that we've encountered during the project. Following, we'll do a post-mortem summary, and finally, we'll talk about moving forward and what we think are the next steps for this project. Starting off with the schedule, we're going to start with Sprint 1. Sprint 1's user stories includes, as an SAP admin, I want to install SAP Hybris locally and set up using sample data so I can set up SAP easier on a VM. So basically, we were going to mess around with it on our own, and once we figured out how to install it and how it works, we were going to install it onto a VM so that we all had a place where we could go locally and make sure we had the same environment for everything we did. As a Spartacus developer, I want to connect Spartacus to SAP. So this was just making sure that we had our front end talking to our back end. Some highlights of the sprint was we were able to install SAP and get it connected to Spartacus and get them able to work together. We also spoke with software architects at Border States, and the low light we had during the sprint was it took much longer than expected to obtain access to SAP. For Sprint 2, our user stories were, as a mobile customer, I would like a shortcut to the store on my phone. So if you're using the website in a browser, you'll get a pop-up asking if you'd like to create a shortcut. Press yes, it'll go right to your home screen, and it'll give you a Border States app-like shortcut that you can use for ease of access. Also, we have, as a customer, I would like to use a site when I'm offline. So just how it seems, if you're using a site, lose connection, you're still going to be able to use a site just with limited features. So in the sprint, we focused a lot on the PWA aspects. We're able to find a way to customize the style of Spartacus using Smart Edit, which we'll delve into a little bit more during Sprint 3 and Sprint 4. Some lowlights where we ran into issues with our SSL certificate. This was an issue because in order for some PWA features to work, we need a valid SSL certificate, and we'll talk about this more in the risks and issues section of the presentation. Also, we were having difficulties because the Spartacus documentation is very limited. For Sprint 3, our user stories were, as a developer, I want to create a new store in SAP using the B2B recipe. Well, the B2B recipe is business to business, and that is what Border States uses. Unfortunately, Spartacus does not support B2B as of right now, so we had to go back to B2C. And we will talk about this a little bit more in the risks and issues section. Next, we have, as a developer, I want to customize the look of Spartacus using Smart Edit. So when you first download Spartacus, it starts you off with a template, and we wanted to make something that would more fit Border State's style. And then next we have, as a developer, I want to add products, categories, a new site to display on the Spartacus. So basically, we have an e-commerce store, we need products to sell. Next we have, as a tester, I want to ensure PWA functionalities work correctly with an SSL on the Spartacus app. So basically, we need tests to make sure everything works correctly, and this is what this story is doing. So a summary of this sprint is we got the B2B recipe installed, but obviously we need to change it back to the B2C. We also figured out more info on SmartEdit. Some lowlights though were we still did not have the SSL certificate. We did not hear back on the status of obtaining one. This was mostly due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which kind of threw a wrench into everything. This meant we were no longer to meet in person, and the whole schedule of the class just got thrown through a loop. As well as that, we also lost contact with one of our other group members, and he was no longer part of the team for Sprint 3 and Sprint 4. For Sprint 4, some of our user stories were, as a site admin, I would like to be able to import new products. This was just so we could populate the site, making sure that it felt like a Border State site. Another one was, as a site designer, I would like to modify the style and layout of the site. This is a continuation from Sprint 3, just making sure things have more polish and making sure the site really reflects how the pilot site looks. Some highlights of this sprint were we were able to finish the project. We finished the videos, including this one, the short video. We also had a presentation with Border States, which we think went very well. Some lowlights to this sprint were we weren't able to get some things working, such as the add to cart, some PWA features such as the offline, but this is mostly due to how new Spartacus is, and it just isn't compatible yet, but we'll talk about that more during the risks and issues section of the presentation.
Alright, so I'm going to show you guys kind of what we have here. So first thing, in order to get our application up and running and to get the progressive web app portion to work correctly, we do have to serve it over a secure connection, so through HTTPS. And in order to do that, we did have to create some self-signed certificates to serve that with. So you can see here we have the cert.pem and the key.pem, and those allow us to use that HTTPS connection. And then to actually run the app, we have to serve it through an HTTP server. You can see down here we do it on port 8080, and then we include that cert.pem, so it's a secure connection there. Alright, so the next part, I'm going to show you just kind of how our site looks. And so what we kind of did is we wanted to look similar to the current e-commerce website that Border States has. So I'm just going to show you and compare you some of the features here. So if we look at Border States, their current e-commerce website, they've got their blue color up here with the logo. They've got this nice background here and some of their products and brands down here. And then I'll go over to ours here, and you can see we incorporated that blue header here with the logo here, and then we copied over this background image and we imported a couple of their products just to show here. Alright, so this next part I'm just going to show you kind of how Spartacus comes with a built-in responsive design. So if I go here and inspect it, and then the Chrome DevTools has this device toolbar thing. So if I click on that, it resizes the application. And up here you have different presets for different devices that you want to mimic the size of. So right now it's on an iPad Pro. If I go over to, say, an iPhone X, you can see everything gets resized. The toolbar here gets shrunk down to a little hamburger icon. So if I click on that, it's a little different there. And then we can also go just to responsive and manually change it how we want. So that's kind of a nice feature that Spartacus has. So it looks really good on mobile, but desktop as well. And that's kind of what we're seeing a lot more with websites and apps these days. Alright, so the next part I'm going to show you is the progressive web app part of the project. So currently Spartacus doesn't support too much with progressive web apps because it is still really new. They're still in development and getting that stuff working. But I'm going to show you kind of what we have here. So if we go over to the application in the Chrome DevTools, we can go to the manifest file, and this just kind of sets all the background information for the app. So we have the app names, the theme colors, we have the logos that we set here, and then we can go over to service worker, and the service worker is what allows you to use PWA features. So you can see we have that up and running, and this is just the file that the service worker is located in. So one of the cool things that it allows us to do is add it to your home screen. So on Chrome for desktop, what you would have to do is you would click the settings bar here, and then you can go to install the app. So here it says install Border States Electric, and if we click on that, it's got our little icon there, and we can hit install. And if I minimize everything here, alright, so as you can see here, what it did is created an icon on here, so if you open that, it'll take you directly to that website. And then in the manifest file, you can set that to just open in a regular Chrome tab or have its own standalone tab where you can't open up any other windows in Chrome, so it's just that website. And then typically, if you're opening this on an Android phone, what you would get your first time visiting is a little banner that pops up that asks if you want to install it to your home screen. So it behaves almost like a native Android app. Currently iPhones do not have that yet, and then Chrome for desktop does not have anything like that. You have to manually do it there.
All right, so now let's get into the risks and issues that we had on this project. The very first issue we had on this project was installing the SAP Hybris 1905 successfully. We each tried to install Hybris, but had varying degrees of success when doing so. Reasons for which are not fully understood at this point yet. We were not able to pinpoint an exact environment change or other setting that was causing a build to succeed on one system and fail on the next. Another issue we came across was how underdeveloped the Spartacus framework actually was. Initially, we had the assumptions that it was kind of set up and ready to go, ready to build a PWA functional website and hit the ground running. This, however, was not the case, as we later found out in development when we tried to switch over to a B2B accelerator. On the B2C accelerator, which we initially used for the project, a lot of the functionality was there and it was working. But when we did try to make the switch over to a B2B, which is business to business, a lot of the checkout functions and other just traditional functions that you would have on a typical e-commerce site were not enabled or working properly. The last major risk or issue that we had encountered was dealing with the SSL certificate. Spartacus itself, in order to function as a PWA, requires having the secure connection, and we were unaware of this initially when doing the development, but as we got to work with this framework, we started to realize, okay, yeah, we do need this. And at initial time, we thought it wouldn't be too hard to actually get a certificate, and we thought, it shouldn't be kind of a painless process. So in the long run, we kind of underestimated the time it would actually take to get an SSL certification for the server that we were running our product on. This in turn risk ended up becoming an actual issue later on, as we could not actually push forward with our development as we would have liked to. And the underestimation of the actual time that we were anticipating the SSL certificate to take was part and due to the fact that COVID had occurred. This kind of put ITS and NDSU's IT department into kind of a stronghold as far as having to set up systems and making sure everything's running properly for everyone to be able to do remote schooling. So as far as our request to get an SSL certificate, I think we were kind of pushed to the bottom of the stack as far as priorities, which is very understandable given the situation. All right, now the big question as far as what we actually got done and how much work is actually accomplished on our initial task. We have current estimates that we got about 70 to 80% of our initial requirements accomplished and finished. The primary goal of this project was to test out a new framework and see if it would work as a PWA solution for Border States Electric to use on their new e-commerce site. Some of the workloads that we had produced included approximately 300 lines of code. That does sound pretty minimal, but a lot of our time actually went into research on the framework itself and understanding how to use SAP Hybris. So the way we broke out our actual individual efforts went into about 25% went into training ourselves on different the products itself, the framework, and understanding how the interaction was supposed to be happening. We put about 10% into the requirements from the customer. This was a kind of give and take interaction between us and Border States Electric. Another 25% went into design. This was kind of going hand in hand with the training aspect, because as we were researching, we kind of look at the design of the underlying framework, and we have to decide, okay, where can we move forward based on this current underlying design. So both of those kind of had back and forth chatter. Coding was at about 5%. That doesn't seem like a lot, as well as the initial, like I said, 300 lines of code that we had written. But a lot of this was due in part to the fact that we had to do a lot of research on these technologies and try and actually understand them. Make sure we weren't making poor design choices while we were developing and just throwing in a bunch of jumbled code. Because we do actually want Border States to be able to utilize this product and move forward with their development process. Another 25% of our time went into testing. A lot of the testing, it just kind of was plug and play, making sure the functionalities are working, testing features that we were adding, as well as just making sure connections were being established. And another 10% of our time went into midterms and final reports, just doing the weekly tasks that we were trying to get done on a weekly basis. Overall, I would say our estimate as far as man hours that had gone into this project is in the ballpark of around 250 hours amongst the three of us. That's a pretty accurate estimate that we believe. As I said, a lot of the time just went into reading documentation, understanding how the Hybris e-commerce backend works, and understanding the new development of Spartacus. All right, so looking forward on this project, I want to go over a few key things. First will be the Spartacus B2B releases. Next, I'll kind of go touch base on some of the styling, also importing products and implementing a QR code scanner. So first, let's get over to the Spartacus B2B release information. Currently, they have planned for Q2 of 2020 to implement actually quite a few B2B features. Some of these features include such things as like B2B checkout, B2B quick order, being able to save the carts, being able to reorder. things like that. A lot of good core key functionality, which you would typically see in an e-commerce site. So that will actually be coming out in Q2 as they're projected. So it should be fairly soon. Some other future development plans that Spartacus has include some interesting things. Two of them, which I have highlighted in a box here, but one of them being B2B commerce quotes. And this is kind of interesting to me because this allows the buyer themselves to produce a quote and send it to the sales rep at Border States Electric directly. Then that sales rep can in turn take that quote and process it as needed and forward it on to potential managers or supervising officials that would approve such an order or produce a counter offer. This is an interesting feature that I believe BSC will be quite interested in for future development. Next thing I kind of want to talk about is the styling. In order to actually edit some of the Spartacus styling itself, you need to utilize a Smart Edit injector. This will enable you to actually kind of go in and modify some of the baseline styling templates that Spartacus provides. And if you don't go that route, you could actually just come up with your own SCSS or CSS styling sheets as you see fit and try and actually produce those and embed them into the Spartacus framework yourselves. The third thing I want to hit on is importing products. Like I said before, we currently have approximately 10 products imported into the backend for SAP Hybris. The next step would be to actually import or bulk import many of the Border States Electric's products that they do actually have. They can do this via bulk imports, or they could do like a scripted iterative way. That based on from what we've seen, the functionality would most likely take the route of scripted iterative approach. The last thing we could see for future development on this would be implementing a QR code scanner. This was actually an initial requirement we got. It's kind of like a fun extra if we could get to it. Unfortunately, we did not get to that point with this project. But we did get into some research and actually kind of found some interesting libraries that might be pretty useful for border states going forward. One of those libraries is JSQR Code. This library is actually a port over from a well-known Java image processing library. And this actually gives you the ability to process images through the browser. Some potential roadblocks we would see with this is just the functionality varies from cellular operating system to another. Some of the tags that one browser might use may be different from another one. It just depends. So that'll be something that they would have to watch out for. Another thing that you would want to look for when developing on this type of library is making sure you modify the error output. Currently, I believe it's JSQR code that outputs just a standard string, and most likely you would want to handle this in some sort of event versus just having string pop out and really mean nothing to you other than tell you you have a problem. You definitely want to handle that error appropriately. And that essentially sums up what we have for future tasks for BSC moving forward, their dev team, things that they can look into and kind of keep an eye on or even test out themselves.